Darlington, this is Good Morning PD on Live 95.
Welcome back to Good Morning PD Live 95. Takes Mondays to make Fridays. Back in the saddle again. We should play the Eagles. The boys are back in town. Right?
Well, that's not the Eagles, but okay.
Who is that?
I know it's
Thin Lizzy.
Thin Lizzy. My bad.
Tin Lizzy?
Well, it should have been the Eagles.
Thin.
What song am I thinking about with the Eagles?
With an H.
You're thinking of New Kid in Town?
New
maybe?
Kid in Town.
Yeah.
That's it.
We're
not the new kids.
We
in
ain't
town.
no damn new kids.
But the
I'm
boys
sorry
are
for
back
saying damn, but we ain't.
Well, and we need to mention as we're going back to our normal, we haven't done the political roundtable in a while. I mean, we certainly realize that there are people in harm's way dealing with flooding.
You're stealing my thunder. Do you think I would really get into the political? I mean, I'm a former politician.
Right.
You know how much I love people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And you talk about that all the time, how much you love people.
Well, at one morning,
I don't love it as much now that I'm not running for office.
I talked to Becky Elliott, your scheduler, and, I was the one, I said, talk to them, but say that it would be a bad thing with this storm and whatever. We need public service announcements. We need the sheriffs to call in.
And we did a lot of that.
And
really
whatever.
did.
We don't need us mumbling about whether Trump ought to be impeached or not, or,
And I'm going to tell you something. Those poor people could give a you-know-what about that.
Well, and I do want to mention we're doing a Facebook Live segment as we speak. You can watch what we're doing by visiting our Facebook page at Live953. I will start off with what you were talking about, what I was talking about. We dodged a bullet in Florence. I mean, in all honesty, we didn't get much, but our neighbors to the north, the border counties of South Carolina and southern North Carolina, really have major problems. I got a friend of mine who is on the road a lot, and he was in Whiteville, North Carolina. He said, Ken, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's total devastation. Consider yourself blessed. Consider all of the PD region by and large. Now, Dillon and, Marion and up that way got real rough weather. They're still dealing with it. So, yeah, you're right. We need to never forget that our friends and neighbors are dealing with a lot of things that we're not having to deal with.
This station and your program is really a PD program.
It is.
And a community program in terms of what's best and what's in the interest of the people who live around here.
Amen. And I'll tell you,
North Carolina.
I'll say this to Jernigan. That person living in the mobile home at the end of the dirt road on the river, I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat. If they need help, we need all hands on deck.
That's exactly right.
It's what's happening at our house, and it's Lisa and I are homeless. I mean, childless. Okay, so we've just sort of got a routine with the two of us, and I've got my couch, I got my spot, I've got my TV, she's got her TV. So my daughter, Mary Stewart, lives in Wilmington right now, has been working, and they came home Tuesday a week ago. Okay, now they can't go back. Where they were living is underwater. Where she was living, there's no stores, there's no end to Wilmington. There may be today from some other route to bring groceries, foods, and supplies. They like you saw the presidency. We hadn't seen it till the Trump went. The MRE's going out. The ICE. It is a mess up there. But Mary Stewart's at home. That's the good news.
Good deal.
The bad news is Mary Stewart's at home. I've lost my couch. I've lost my TV. I can tell you off there. I mean, anyway, but I tell you something. It's bad. My son-in-law is came up last night, spent the night. So I was a few minutes late this morning, and he's driving to New York because they need a car in New York. They had the car in Palm Beach. He and I got up this morning and was looking on Waze how he can get to New York. So the PD River apparently has crested in Sherrall. Mm-hmm. So he can go up 52, we think, go up 52 to Greensboro. What is that, 40?
40.
40, and then he can take 40 east to hit 95 to go to New York.
But it's a mess. I mean,
he can't. There's so many stops. Like, hell, it wasn't in today's paper. I showed this. I-95 remains closed from US 52 to River Bridge. It's just, I just had never seen anything like that.
Well, I mean, it's tough, and we can't forget our friends and neighbors.
One of the things that I think is a real paradox. You just said this word, blessed. I've been saying that, and all of a sudden, does that mean somebody else is cursed?
Well, I mean,
I know I'm thankful. Don't get me wrong, but when I say we're blessed, I mean, did God curse somebody else? I don't think so. I don't. But I really feel bad about saying I'm blessed when I see these people.
I mean, Rod, I'm of the opinion we get real theological here. I'm of the opinion God set the universe in order, and there's just some things happen that you and I will never know why, when, where, and how.
But I am thankful we didn't have a bad.
Amen.
Year.
I go back to the movie Rudy. I mean, here's where I land with religiosity. when Rudy couldn't figure out why he couldn't get accepted to Notre Dame. If you remember the scene in the movie, and the pastors or the priest, the Catholic priest is there, and he says, I don't know why. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I've done everything but asked of me, and I can't get accepted to Notre Dame. I prayed. And the father says, son, there are two things I'm sure of. He said, I've been in the ministry 40 years. There's two things I'm sure of. There is a God, and I ain't him. And that's kind of where I land. There is a God, and I ain't him, and I have no idea why Dillon's dealing with what they're dealing with, Wilmington's dealing with what they're dealing with, and we're not. I have no idea. I just know that we're called and compelled to care for our fellow man, and now's when we need to exhibit those qualities and characteristics.
One of the things I love about growing up being a Catholic is the sign of the cross. If I've done that a million times, Lisa, and I just go, I don't know. I don't know. This is the sign of the cross.
That ain't the sign of the cross. That's the sign of John Roach. You know that as good as I do. When I was a kid in the backyard, John Roach would do that before he shot free throws. And I would do it in my backyard. My father was.
Y'all kids ain't got a clue what we're talking about.
What the hell you doing? You're not a Catholic.
It don't matter, man.
I said, I don't know.
John Roach.
I said, but John Roach did it, so I'm going to do it.
Hey, to tell you something else I heard the other day, too, that I hadn't done in a long time. I was watching this movie on Netflix. Anyway, part of Netflix. I don't watch Netflix that much, but again, my daughter, they were watching some movie and they were talking about saying Hail Marys. I went, I hadn't done that in a long time, but I used to, when Roach and all these guys are playing, and you were just sitting there playing, I got where I could say a Hail Mary once every 5 seconds, because I figured as many times as I could say Hail Mary, we were going to win the ball game.
I want to start with you, Dr. Thigpen, because we are going to get into the world of politics. We've got and we'll talk specifically about Kavanaugh in a second. I'm sure we'll have some disagreement there, and that's fine. But I want you, if you don't mind, I was thinking about when I'm talking about historically, the historical context of when these proceedings became so very political.
Well, Supreme Court nominations have always been partisan. It's in recent years when they become ideological. I mean,
when you say recent years, I mean,
since the late 60s, I don't remember in modern times a contested situation where ideology played a major role, or where they held these kinds of hearings. I mean, one of my favorite judicial figures is the fellow named Roger Brooke Taney. He was a Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, first Roman Catholic Chief Justice from Maryland. And, he had been turned down. He had been nominated by Andrew Jackson for an associate position on the United States Supreme Court. And the Whigs voted against him, and they controlled the Senate. And, he didn't get on, but he got on later. Now, where he gets the bad knock is that, he was the Chief Justice who presided over the, which was the case where it was decided that anybody who had once been a slave had no rights to citizenship.
Oh, God. Dred Scott.
But, I mean, even George Washington had difficulty at times. And, in the 1930s, John Parker was turned down by the United States Senate when he was nominated by President Hoover, who wanted a Southerner on the court. And many of the Southern senators voted against him because they were afraid Hoover was trying to build the Republican Party in the South, and they didn't want that. So there's always been partisanship. But as we were saying, there were no hearings on nominations to the United States Supreme Court until the late 1960s, and I think I'm correct about that. For instance, Earl Warren, who was much damned and much loved in different circles as Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court in the early 1950s, and throughout most of the 50s, there were no hearings. The name was sent over, and they voted up, or voted it down. There have long been a number of United States senators who vote for whoever the president sends over. Lindsey Graham is one of those kinds of people. I mean, he voted, for Kagan.
Sotomayor?
Yes, Sotomayor. And, he's always said elections have consequences.
And he's there to advise and consent.
That's right. and unless there's something critically, awfully wrong with them, there's always been a collage of United States senators who say he's been nominated properly by the President of the United States. We don't find anything wrong with him. We're going to vote for him.
Rod, when did this happen? When did this divide? I mean, obviously, we're in hyper division right now. But I mean, I'm talking to Dr. Thigpen about history. But I mean, in recent times, it has become very ideology.
I'm going to tell you when it happened. Well, I think it's funny, and I've heard you comment on proceedings, and hearings on Kavanaugh. At least he's getting one. That's more than you can say about Merrick Garland, right? I mean, Merrick Garland. Your Republicans, I know you were attacking the Democrats. I listened to you coming in, but your Republicans, seriously, did not give him the time of day. Okay? Now, you're saying, I heard your caller saying they've beaten him up. I think part of that is a bent-up frustration. We didn't have a hearing. Now he's having a hearing, and by God, we're going to get our pound of flesh. That's awful, and I hate it. But I'm going to tell you, to me, when it happened, when you had 60 votes, you had to sit there and get a lot of Democrats or a lot of Republicans to go with you. And it's pretty hard to go. Well, you had the Lindsey Grahams to say elections had consequences. But still, you still needed a consensus of people that this guy is not that bad or this woman's not that bad. Let's put her on there. When Harry Reid, Democrat, Senate Majority Leader, changed the rules on judges, but not the Supreme Court judges, to a simple majority, that was, I think, that was
the door.
He opened the door. He opened Pandora's box, and Mitch McConnell threw the lid off. Now, in my opinion, if you'd had the 60 votes rule today, Mitch McConnell would have thrown it out the window. That's a sad state of affairs, and I know there's a lot of people who are against that 60 votes. Trump's still railing on it, but in our country's history, and Doc can verify me, that 60 votes good because it forces you to You made a comment this morning, and I'm going to go back to the same thing. You kept saying, you think these Democrats are going to work with these Republicans? You think they're going to? Well, I'm going to flip it. You think these Republicans work with Democrats?
No.
Your argument this morning, you're all fired up. That's a sword. It's a double-edged sword, and it's bad on both sides.
Well,
and 60 votes requires the political parties. It requires John McCain.
But a simple majority.
It calls for John McCain and a Joe Biden to sit next to each other and try to figure out a way to get this thing done by working together.
I don't disagree with you. All I'm arguing is that the simple majority allows you to fight fire with fire.
Yes.
I mean, it really does. It allows you to not have to be pragmatic, to not have to be moderate. And I think you're exactly right. It's surprised you. I'll agree with you on Merrick Garland. I do believe he deserved a hearing.
Put him down if you don't want him.
Now, I understand the politics of the day, and I understand what Biden said when Biden was playing the political game. But I do believe that the sitting president has a right at that opportunity in time and moment in time to choose who he wants to be on that Supreme Court. And I think Garland deserved a hearing.
I would agree. I thought that was a mistake when it happened. And, Garland probably wouldn't have been all that bad. He was sort of a moderate.
And he tried to pick somebody like him that would appeal to both sides.
That's right. And but here we are today. We were talking about when did this ideological stuff start to come into play? Partisan / ideological. And I think it was back in the late 60s with Abe Fortas. He had been, very liberal, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and President Johnson, who was a pal of real close with Abe Fortas, he sought to elevate him to the Chief Justiceship. And that's when you begin to hold hearings. And eventually Johnson had to, and it was an election year, presidential election year, he had to withdraw Fortas's name. And finally, when Nixon won the presidency, next thing you know, the Republicans, got the Chief Justiceship with Justice Berger. Now, this with respect to what's going on right now with Kavanaugh.
Let's do this. Before we go to Kavanaugh, let's take a break. I don't want to get behind too much. Let's take a break. We'll come back after the break. We'll touch on the current situation with the nominee and confirmation or potential confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Good morning, PD Live 95. Palmetto Commercial Real Estate, our sponsor, takes Mondays to make Fridays We'll be back in a second.